Hey there, everyone, and welcome to Chapter 5 on Food Safety Management Systems. So here, the Food Safety Management, or HACCP system, is going to be discussed. So the HACCP system is a system which allows for food handlers to follow the processes of producing menu items with a focus on preventing contamination of food by isolating any place in the chain of production which may allow for the infiltration of pathogens. So basically what that means is it's a way of developing a system that allows you to check every process or every step in your process to find where something might go wrong and then find a way to correct it if it does go wrong. So let's get into it and we'll see what we can do. So food safety management systems are foundational in ensuring that the food clients consume is safe and free from hazards. One of the most widely recognized and effective systems used globally is the Hazard Analysis and Critical Control Point System, or the HACCP system. The system provides a structured approach to identifying, evaluating, and controlling food safety hazards throughout the whole production process. The HACCP is a systemic system which takes a preventative approach to food safety development for everything. It was developed by the space program at NASA in order to make sure that the food they sent up to orbit wasn't going to make astronauts sick. It evaluates and controls hazards that are significant for the food safety process. So rather than relying on a single end product testing, the HACCP system emphasizes a proactive approach to implement measures throughout the food production process to identify any potential points of contamination and develop strategies to close those gaps. So the primary purpose of the HACCP system is to prevent food safety hazards before they occur, and thereby reducing the risk of foodborne illness and making sure that the customers stay safe. So a critical control point is a specific step in the food production process where control can be applied to prevent, eliminate, or reduce a food safety hazard to an acceptable level. So identifying a critical control point is essential because it follows food handlers and processors to focus on the most critical stages of production where intervention will have the greatest impact on food safety. Proper identification and management of these control points can help to ensure that hazards don't compromise the safety of the final food product. So the HACCP system is primarily built on 7 foundational principles. The principles or steps provide a comprehensive framework for ensuring that food is kept under controlled circumstances, right from production through delivery to service. So the first step is the conducting a hazard analysis. So this step involves identifying potential biological, chemical, and physical hazards that may be present in the food production process. Each stage of food handling is examined to determine where hazards can occur and what those specific hazards are. The next step is to identify your critical control points. So once the hazards are identified, the next step is to determine the points at which some type of control needs to be applied. So at what point does the number of something being there cause a problem? In epidemiology, when we're trying to study outbreaks, we usually say, well, there's usually 1 or 2 cases of this disease every year, so that's a tolerable amount. If we get 3 to 4 cases, then we've reached our control point and we need to take some action. So something along those lines. Next, you have to establish critical limits. So for each control point, you have to have a measurable critical limit established. So those limits represent the threshold that can't be exceeded to ensure food safety. For example, minimum cooking temperature for meat products is the very least that should be achieved. So I guess my example earlier of the number of cases of a disease more fits into a critical limit. The control point is the diseases. We don't want to have diseases happen. So if diseases happen, what do we have to do? The limit is telling us how many of that disease we can have in. So establishing monitoring procedures. Monitoring activities are put in place to ensure that each critical control point stays within that critical limit. So now we have diseases, we don't want them, but how many are we going to allow before we realize we have to take action? So the control point is diseases, the limit is how many are we going to allow, and then the monitoring procedures is how are we going to keep an eye on this? So establishing corrective actions. This is where monitoring indicates that a control point is not within its critical limits and critical actions should be taken. So deciding in advance how to respond to foreseeable events, such as calling a repair company if a fridge malfunctions, can limit the harm caused by any accidents or other problems. These actions can help to ensure that potentially unsafe food doesn't get released to the public and that the process is brought back under control. So we then have to establish a verification procedure. Um, these procedures ensure that the HACCP system works effectively. So this is kind of like your self-audit. It includes activities like validation of control points, review of records, and periodic audits of the system. So logs, reports should be constantly reviewed by management teams, and regular inspections should be conducted to audit the existing processes and then making changes or adaptations where they need to be done on a regular, ongoing basis. And then you also have to establish a record keeping or documentation system, because you have to maintain proper documentation to provide evidence that the HACCP system is being followed, and it also helps to trace the origin of any problems that might arise throughout your processes. So you have to find a way to measure and keep track of, like, for example, uh, keeping a fridge temperature log on the front of your fridge to keep track of the temperatures. So the benefits of implementing a HACCP system include things like it enhances food safety by following or proactive risk management. It rather than being reactive, it helps with compliance to regulatory standards, as it helps business meet legal requirements and avoid penalties. It can also increase customer and stakeholder confidence in the company as they start to rely on the safety and reliability of your product and your procedures. So, and really at its foundation, it helps to minimize the risk of foodborne illnesses and protects the brand reputation and simplifies the process of conducting recalls and ensuring product traceability. So on top of keeping the records, you have to maintain the records somewhere. So record keeping is an essential component of the system because it provides the documented history of your food safety practices and helps to demonstrate that measures are consistently being applied. The records include monitoring logs, corrective actions, uh, verification activities, employee training logs, all those things which should be maintained for a set period, usually about 5 years or so. Certain other ones have specific criteria, but for generally most records need to be kept for around 5 years. Especially if there's an outbreak or some kind, you need to make sure that you have those records on hand of where you got the food, how it got there, what condition it was in, all those kinds of things. So proper retention of records supports investigations and ensures that we can trace where bad food might have come from or where something might have gone wrong. So HACCP was basically been proven effective in a lot of real world food handling scenarios. As I said, it was developed for the space program. Another example is food service establishments that implement HACCP are generally able to identify and eliminate recurring issues of undercooked poultry. Through hazard analysis and critical limit monitoring, the specific businesses were able to improve their cooking procedures and reduce the risk of illnesses by following a HACCP procedure and making sure that everything was in line where it needed to be. So the HACCP system is a critical tool in food safety management. By identifying hazards and applying control measures at key stages of the production process, it significantly reduces the risk of contamination. The 7 principles of HACCP provide structured, proactive approach to ensuring that the safety of food products and on an ongoing training, adherence to HACCP guidelines and diligent record keeping can be essential to maintaining safe environments for your food. And food businesses are strongly encouraged to regularly review their HACCP plans as part of a broader commitment to public health and consumer protection.